Hello, detectives, and welcome to Stay Tuned for Mystery, a Nancy Drew podcast, and welcome to the first official episode of Season 2. As you may have noticed, I did take a bit of a hiatus over the summer from the podcast because one, I had a busy summer, but two, I also took a step back to kind of plan for this season 2. And I do just have to say right off the bat, I actually have gained quite a few new followers or subscribers to my podcast over Spotify, at least, during this hiatus when I wasn't, actively producing content. And I want to just say off the bat, just how much I appreciate you guys. Especially taking a big hiatus, I really didn't expect, to kind of gain any kind of new following while, I was gone and not producing content. And the experience, that has been quite the opposite, really. There are so many new friends here. So thank you so much, for subscribing to my podcast, even when I wasn't, actively producing out content. And I hope this was worth the wait for you. So as many of you know, for about a year of having my podcast, a year and a half-ish maybe, I had been putting out just random episodes on a somewhat weekly basis. I say somewhat very loosely. Instead, I am going to now start doing seasons, and so while they won't be out as often and they'll be shorter seasons, in return, they're going to be a bit longer and more in depth, and I'll be focusing more time into them. So basically, they'll have a lot more meat to them. So with that, I'm so excited to introduce to you Season 2 of the Stay Tuned for Mystery podcast, which is going to be seasonal gameplay. I have 4 episodes planned, obviously to go with all seasons, and we will be doing Nancy in autumn, Nancy in winter, Nancy in spring, and Nancy in summer. Obviously, we're starting off with Nancy in autumn because at the time that this podcast is coming out, we are in autumn right now. So we are right in the middle of fall, right in the middle of spooky season. So how could I not start with Nancy in autumn? This was also very inspired by Persephone in Winter, which is the play that the plot of Labyrinth of Lies, the 31st Nancy Drew game, focuses on. So it felt right to add a little nod to one of those games. Now, we'll be discussing not only personal games I recommend to play in each season, but we're also going to be really diving more into all of the specific games and discussing seasonal elements of each game that I love, maybe some untraditional elements that you might not have thought of, and also optional things that you can do in-game to elevate the seasonal game experience. So unlike my previous episodes, I did do a short podcast episode for every season. I did seasonal game recommendations. So unlike that, I kind of took those episodes and kind of just bulked it up a little bit. And this series also, which is something that the other episodes did not have, this season or series will include every single Nancy Drew game. So all 34 Nancy Drew games, they have a place on one of these episodes. It's all planned out. So with that being said, grab a sweater, maybe a pumpkin latte, and let's dive into our first season, Autumn, and I hope you enjoy Season 2 of the podcast. All right, detectives, and welcome to our first episode of Season 2, Nancy in Autumn. So fall, like many people, I think is my very favorite season. I feel like I say that every time a new season starts, like every time it comes around, I'm like, oh, springtime, definitely my favorite. Summer, definitely my favorite, unmatched. But I do really love fall. I think fall, if I had to choose, I think fall is my absolute favorite season. And so I love to celebrate really the beginning of this season. And personally, if I'm looking for seasonal or a seasonal playthrough in these games for fall specifically, I'm looking for a transitionally cozy feel, if that makes sense. I don't know if any of you can relate. I'm sure some of you can. So like meaning it's like we have a crisp and a cozy feel to the game, but we can also enjoy the outdoors in the game. You know, it's we're not completely snowed into a building yet. Like we're not trapped in there. We're not completely buried under a blanket quite yet, but it's on the horizon. We can see it coming up. So I think especially for very early fall, like in that like September stage of kids are back to school, we're getting the fall decorations out, but it's still probably in the 70s and the 80s and god, even the 90s for some of the United States. I really love the games Silent Spy, Danger on Deception Island, Stay Tuned for Danger, and The Final Scene. Now, I think some of these might be a bit different than the traditional seasonal game recommendations. The Silent Spy itself doesn't have too many like fall characteristics to immerse yourself in that sense. But I do think the kind of like cloudy Scotland atmosphere can really bring a fall is coming kind of feel. I also do think the cookie decorating mini game can also bring fall spirit too, because I know baking cookies is usually like a year-round activity, but I think cookie baking is it's just such a fun little like fall activity to do for me personally. Also, pretty much everyone except Ewan in this game is dressed for the fall season, you know, with sweaters and boots and jackets, etc. Danger on Deception Island, I think, is also a fantastic early fall game. I know the game technically takes place in the summer, like in June, but seriously, the vibes are immaculate and it's so easy to immerse yourself in the atmosphere in with this one. And I think it's the perfect combination of outdoor and indoor atmospheres too. Like it's still warm enough that in the game like you can still do activities like kayaking and biking, but it's foggy and everybody is dressed in sweaters. So it hints to you that like the weather is still pretty cool outside, you know? And then when you're done doing all of the outdoor activities in the cool fog air, you can then go inside to the Hot Kettle Cafe. And in the game, you have the option to order clam chowder, which is obviously, it's such a warm, cozy soup. You can also order muffins too in the game. And just the vibe of the cafe itself, it just feels so warm. Stay Tuned for Danger is probably also an unlikely game that you would think would make this list. Truthfully, I'm not sure really where anybody would put Stay Tuned for Danger in a seasonal, you know, game list. But while there isn't a whole lot of seasonal game play aspects to this game, I do love the fireplace aspect in the game, like when you switch it to nighttime. The fireplace in Maddie's apartment is lit. I do feel like Maddie's apartment too, it does have a very cozy vibe to it, like with the fireplace especially, but with all of the different decor and like the candles and everything and whatnot, I think it can add that cozy fall vibe that we might all be looking for in a Nancy Drew game. The final scene may also be a very unlikely choice for this list, but I do think there's something dark and really spooky to this game. Like, the idea of being trapped in this like dark, musty theater with a ticking timer until the whole building gets demolished, like there's a spooky aspect in that regard, and it does have a very cold feel to it, which is why I put it in the transitionally fall kind of tier. I feel like it's a great way to transition, you know, from like warm, happy weather to like, you know, kind of like we're not really in spooky season yet, but you know, like it's coming and we want to get ready for it. It's a good way, you know, to kind of like start that descent into spooky season. I will say too, I think the newest game, Mystery of the Seven Keys, is a great October game. I know the game itself is set to take place in March, but there are just so many fall aspects to it that we absolutely cannot ignore. So, first, Radix sweater. No, I'm kidding. But honestly, Radek himself is like, I feel like the perfect fall outfit. I also think that like the mist that comes up in the courtyard when we're wandering around at night, it really sets the tone there. And oh, and the coffee puzzle, I think is the most like perfect cozy fall like puzzle activity to do. Like it's just hot coffee, very cozy. And I do love the entire atmosphere of the cafe itself. Keyword, the cafe. I think that's a really cozy aspect, and it just makes it so easy to like just, kind of cozy up with this game. Like again, we're not confined like indoors somewhere. It's not cold enough for that yet, but it's we got to put on a jacket and it mists at night. So now we're getting into mid fall, which in my mind is around like October, Halloween. Like the weather is crisp and cool for most of North America at this point. We're deep into sweater season, there's pumpkins everywhere. So, of course, you probably assumed Midnight in Salem is, I think, hands down, the most perfect game to play around Halloween. And hear me out on this. I do not feel that way because it's the best game ever. But I do think if you are going to play this game, play it around Halloween. We all know the atmosphere itself is great. The gameplay itself is not fantastic at all, but I have to say, the atmosphere with all of the leaves changing and the cemetery and all of like the Halloween decorations out everywhere, but there are also other like Halloweeny aspects to this game that I really do like. So the tea shop, even though we can't really order like any pastries or anything like that, that would have been super fun to do, honestly. The tea shop is a cozy vibe, but also like getting to visit Olivia's like witchy shop and just how all of that is decorated, and just like how I think how small it is too. It's just this like tiny little witchy shop. It's the perfect, I think, spooky aspect. And while the ghost tour that we can take in the game that could use a lot improvement, that is a fun, really spooky aspect to the game. I have to give credit where credit is due. And is there anything better than like making pancakes with your friends on a crisp fall morning and making said pancakes into cute, spooky shapes? No, there is not. Just, the pancake puzzle in general, it's, you know, again, I mean, we gotta take this game like for what it is. I do love the fact that we can like shape the pancakes like into little spooky shapes, and like each character gets a certain spooky shape and we can give pancakes to all of the characters. I do think that's really cute. And also the pumpkin decorating, like the mini game there. I do think that's a really fun aspect in this game. And I actually do like the fact that we can take the pumpkins and like place them all around different locations and turn them into jack-o'-lanterns. I do really love that mini game. And definitely sneaking around the cemetery at night with like the sound of the leaves rustling and then in the tunnels underground. I really do like those spooky aspects to the game. And honestly, this game never fails to put me in like the mood for spooky season. You'll have to tell me in the comments, whether you're listening on YouTube or Spotify. Please tell me if my little spiel about Midnight in Salem turned you into a mid apologist. I also did originally have Legend of the Crystal Skull in the list of spring games because it does take place, famously on May 31st. And I also think it's easy to kind of see that game as like late summer, definitely humid, muggy, like a southern feel to it when you're playing the game. But I did end up moving it onto the fall list because honestly, I think this game truly has such a spooky, Halloweeny feel to it. So not only with the setting itself, with it being at night and all of the rain, but the entire atmosphere to the game as well. Like the power's out, so we're in this spooky kind of musty house with only a ton of candles. Like that's the only light source we have. And we also spend a third of the game pretty much out in the rainy graveyards, maybe even more than that. There's also, I mean, literally the entire plot of the game revolves around a skull, for which itself is spooky, but also the side quest of finding all the glass eyes, very spooky as well. Very Halloweeny there. And also getting to spend time at Zeke's is, I feel like that's a whole Halloween vibe to it. You know, like between like all the string lights in there, like all like just the weird curios and like the mystical toast that they sell. It's just, it's all so perfect. Also, of course, Ghost of Thornton Hall is an absolutely lovely spooky game to play, especially around Halloween. While there is the main plot of the ghost herself, Charlotte, and all of the hauntings and whatnot that you can experience, I also do really appreciate the other spooky aspects to this game, like such as like it only takes place at night. And so of course, like wandering around this property that's basically in shambles and the abandoned ruins where Charlotte passed away and the cemetery, they all add such a really spooky depth to this game. Also, I know this is such a minor aspect to the game as well, but honestly, the little tea bar that we can make cups of tea throughout the game, I think that's also like a cozy, maybe not necessarily spooky, but like definitely like just a cozy little warm aspect to the game as well. So now we're moving into late fall, which in my opinion is like, mid to late November. I know that it also coincides with American Thanksgiving and the start of the holiday season for a lot of people, but I do think there honestly really is an aspect to November that's like maybe still a little bit spooky. It's like the post Halloween, like dark November feel to it. Like right after Halloween is daylight savings time. And, then it obviously gets dark super early. In the Pacific Northwest, we have like super short days once that daylight savings time hits. And I think it has the potential to be a dark and spooky kind of, little time before we head into like, the cheerful holiday season. Now, Captive Curse is a game I would recommend for this kind of feel, not only because of the spooky monster aspect to it, which is the main plot point of the game, but also for when we get to venture outside in the courtyard and in the forest behind the castle. You can just hear like the spooky ambiance in that, like the owl hooting sometimes. I think that's an owl. That's in the game. There's an owl in the game, right? And just the other little creatures like rustling around in the forest and the fog that overlaps the forest. It all just gives such a like a dark, cool, spooky feel to it. And the castle itself also has, I think, kind of a spooky, cold, empty feel to it when we're wandering around there. And I feel like all the treats that we eat in this game from that machine in the gift shop, like the apple fritter, the soft pretzel, the cake, and I forget what the other one is. I think it's like a sausage or something. I mean, I feel like they're all such warm, cozy treats. The Curse of Blackmore Manor is also a game that I feel is very similar in that aspect. Like, we don't go outside in this game except for the very beginning of the game, but when we are in the house, it has that same cold, like, spooky, empty feel to it. Also, while the ghost hunt game, it's more silly than actually spooky. It is sort of like a fun little aspect to the game that I feel like coincides like with the fall season, with the spooky fall. And especially when we get into the passageways and then we get to explore like the darkest, like most like decrepit part of the entire house, only then to find our way into this like ancient alchemy lab and have to burn like molten metal. That really adds so much to the atmosphere as well. And also, of course, I have to mention the menu options that we have to order in this game, they also really contribute to that. I mean, they're all such like warm, cozy foods, like the soup and like the turkey with the mashed potatoes. It's very reminiscent of like an American Thanksgiving meal, and like the bangers and mash and like the pot pie, or sorry, not the pot pie, the meat pie. They're all such like warm, like cozy foods. The last segment of the fall episode is warnings at Waverly Academy to officially end the fall season and plunge into the winter season. Well, I do think this is an awesome winter game as well. I think I originally had it when I did my seasonal game recommendation episodes. I think Waverly Academy was definitely in the winter episode, but I do love this game, really combines like fall and winter together, which is what I think makes it like a perfect late fall game to play. And I know in the game that the students are on midterm study break, which I'm not sure is that made up for the game? Is that a thing anywhere? I know I'm not familiar with it. I grew up in North America, so I'm not totally sure. But correct me if I'm wrong, but this game really does inhabit like the classic college, like students' finals cram session. I know usually the end of the semester is like in early mid December, um, you know, but all the students they're doing papers and they're studying and they're just kind of like being like frantic students, which I can personally relate to so well. And I think, a lot or some of you can relate to also. It's like, it's like that cram session where they're hitting up the snack bar at all hours of the day to get fuel to write those papers and instead of eating actual meals. So that aspect alone reminds me of kind of the end of the fall semester in that sense, but I also really love the incorporation of Edgar Allan Poe into this and like the black cat and the raven references in this game as well. I feel like that adds kind of a little spooky aspect to it that it isn't necessarily full on Halloween, but it's a little bit of the spooky November feel that I mentioned earlier. Like it's taking like little aspects of spooky season and it's kind of like it's transitioning like out of spooky season like into like winter like jolly festive holidays. Like some remnants of Halloween are still there, but not completely. Something that I also especially love about this game is the progression of the snowfall. I just think that's such a cool thing, and honestly, I wish more games had that. Like when we start out in the game, it's not snowing at all, and we're just walking around outside like totally fine. But then gradually, as we progress through the game, like the snow, it starts to fall at one point. Like when we go outside, it's like the snow isn't sticking yet, but it started to fall down. And by the end of the game, we're in a full on blizzard. Like when you walk outside in the game, it's like you can barely see like where you're walking, you can barely see in front of you. I feel like that adds such a unique ambiance feel to the game where it's like like I said earlier, it's the perfect point where fall ends and where winter begins. So therefore, it was the perfect game to end this fall episode and to transition into Nancy and Winter. So that, detectives, is my full Nancy and Autumn analysis. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope you enjoyed the three like tiers that I came up with. I really enjoyed kind of not only putting each Nancy Drew game into a season category, but also I really enjoyed doing those tiers, like the beginning of the season and the middle of the season and then the very end of the season, which transitions into the next one. Please, please, please kindly let me know what you think of these. If you're listening on Spotify, you can comment on there. Obviously, if you're listening on YouTube, you can comment on the episode there as well. And I hope you tune in next time for Nancy and Winter. As a reminder, if you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to review the show. If you're listening on Spotify, you can review it in stars. And please feel free to, if you feel so inclined, give it a thumbs up if you're listening on YouTube as well. No matter where you're listening, if you'd like to be notified every time a new episode or other fun things come out, make sure you're subscribed there as well. And you can also find me at Stay Tuned for Mystery on YouTube for more Nancy Drew gaming content, and Twitch as well, also under Stay Tuned for Mystery for more Nancy Drew and other gaming streams. Thank you so much for listening, detectives, and I will chat with you soon. Stay tuned.